Select Board meeting for May 4th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting order at 6 p.m. For the public who are watching tonight, the purpose of this meeting is to conduct fire chief interviews for Grafton's first full-time fire chief. Before we get into the schedule, I would like to ask everyone please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Before we call in the first candidates, just for everyone's sake of the board, we're going to go in alphabetical order tonight. So we're going to start off with Captain Mclean, and then we're going to follow with Deputy Chief Matthew, and then we're going to finish up with Captain McDonough. Tonight, I have a list of questions that I will be reading to the applicant as we discussed last night. Last but not least, before we get going, does anybody have any questions about the process tonight before we call the first candidate in?
How are you going to handle follow-up questions?
I guess that depends on the question. Follow-up questions to what?
To the question.
To their follow-up questions to us, or our follow-up questions to our questions?
Yeah, our follow-up questions.
I guess we can handle that on a case-by-case basis.
But it will go through you,
Well,
just to keep it organized.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Is that okay?
I think so. I just wanted to make sure, because clearly we just weren't on the same page. Now we are. That's all.
Okay.
Just wanted to get us all.
Okay. All right. Any further questions or concerns? All right. Why don't we call up our first candidate here, Captain Mclean.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh,
Hello.
Good evening, Captain Mclean. How are you?
Well, how are you?
Good. Thank you for coming out tonight. Before we get into our interview questions, I'll be reading the questions to you one at a time tonight. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to give a brief intro about yourself to the board, and we'll get started.
Sure. I've been in the fire service for 12 years. I just came over to Grafton a little over a year ago. I love the town. I love the community. I am currently in the process of getting my master's degree. I'm a master's of public administration from Anna Maria College. I'm 3 classes away. I took a little hiatus for a second, but I plan to finish that this year. Other than that, I live in town. I just moved here. I think it's a great community. I'm married, and I have a little 3-year-old golden doodle.
All right. Thank you. All right, so the first question is we wanted to like to ask you is, why did you apply to be Grafton's first full-time fire chief?
I wanted to see someone in this position who wanted to take care of the town. Someone who, as a resident myself of the town of Grafton and as a member of the Grafton Fire Department, I have a stake in this community. I think it's important that the taxpayers and stakeholders in this community and the members of the department have a leader and a chief that wants to serve and protect this town. And I believe that the reason I put in for this was to be that person in that position.
Thank you. What are the biggest challenges that you anticipate in the transition from your current rank to chief? And then, based on the challenges you list out, how do you plan to overcome them?
I'd say the first one would probably be respect. I came over here with the idea that I would earn respect through my actions. And I think that stepping up as chief, I've earned respect just as a captain, I think, but a chief is a whole nother rank. Also, one big thing will be, if we look at the study from 2018, transitioning, if at any time, into a full-time department from a call department. will be difficult but manageable.
Okay, thank you. How has your continued education prepared you for becoming fire chief? And what further educational pursuits would you benefit from as chief?
So I would say that I've never stopped learning, and I never will never stop learning. I'm someone who, this is a very dynamic field, and I think that you constantly need to train. There's no time that you can stop. Things have changed over the past 100 years, and they will continue changing. So it's very important to continue your education, whether it's at the Massachusetts Fire Academy, National Fire Academy, etc. I plan to take the Executive Fire Officer and Chief Fire Officer courses down at the National Fire Academy. That's my next venture after my master's degree. As far as, can you actually reread the first part of the question?
I sure can.
Apologize.
How has your continued education prepared you for becoming fire chief? And what further educational pursuits would you benefit from as chief?
So in the first short while that I've been here, I've taken hold of a couple grants. We've received a few of them. My education has shown me how to budget. Obviously, there are a lot of sources around here that can help me with things that I lack, but the education that I've received from simply going to academy classes to master's degree classes have taught me how to bring the department together as a whole, act as a leader, move forward with our SOPs and SOGs, how important training is, and how to put out retention and recruitment, and make that a top priority in the department.
Okay. Tell me about something that challenged you as a leader. Did this change your way of thinking? Did it improve your leadership abilities?
That's a very good question. We had, actually, this is a very tough question. There was a building in town that was told that it needed a fire suppression system, and it did not. But that really doesn't describe really a leadership skill up there. To be honest, this is a difficult question for me. Training, I would say. Training, there's been scenarios. Let me use a real life scenario, for example. We had a structure fire over in a mutual aid town, and in the basement, I was tasked with bringing people down into the basement to extinguish the rest of the fire. During that, there was a younger member who was in front of me, who temporarily got lost and kind of ran out of air, and it was tasked with me and another person to make sure that he got out safely. And that was not a hard process to do, but it was one where there was that was a more important goal than actually extinguishing the fire itself. There was plenty of other crews that could get out, but the safety of the members of the department comes first, after the life safety of the person who owns the house.
And, okay. How do you view the role of the fire chief in Grafton, and what are the most important traits needed to be successful?
I think the most important thing is to be a leader. That's what the department needs. You have other leaders who work underneath you, and being one department itself is going to be very important, as we have 3 stations that might act a little separate from time to time, which is great in their training and so forth, but we need to come together as one department. Things that are very important in a leadership role are respect, being truthful, and motivating. That's earning respect from other people, but having them respect you. Being truthful to them, knowing when you can say, I don't know the answer to that, or being not afraid to fail, and always giving somebody a chance to be motivated. From our newest members to our senior officers, I think we all need a goal to be the best that we can be to serve this community.
Thank you. Bit of a different question here. What advice would you give yourself at the age of 15?
Change your career path. At the age of 15, I wanted to be a psychologist, and I went to school for that first. That being said, if I hadn't gone through the trials and tribulations that I had, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't have the friendships I had. I wouldn't have the relationship I'm in. But I would say that never stop achieving, never stop wanting more, never stop trying to be better and to better yourself, because that builds up the people around you as well.
Okay. How would you describe your leadership style? How would you gain the trust of the department and improvement maintaining department morale?
I think you need to lead by action. That includes a lot of things. Making sure that we have a system of SOPs and SOGs that work currently, and if there are gaps or problems with the department, understanding what they are and setting goals and benchmarks for the department ourselves to achieve those goals. And if there are flaws, to try to attempt to fix them, using our officers for the best of their ability and motivating them to teach those who will take over their job at some point that they have a lot of set of skills to learn and they're open to teaching them. For those newest members, giving them the opportunity to be on the fire ground to see what's going on, and helping them get through the ranks by giving them the resources that they need.
Okay. What's your vision of the Grafton Fire Department? And what would you like to achieve 5 years from now? Last part of this question is, how would you lead the department to achieve those results?
I think the vision of the fire department in the town of Grafton is to serve the members of the community with the best professional department that we could possibly have. As a growing community of almost 20,000 people, with many both commercial and residential projects, the potential need to look at and revisit that MRI study in 2018 of adding full-time staff is very important. That being said, the call staff here are the core of the department, and across the country it is difficult to retain those staff. We need to actively recruit, as we have been over the past few months, and put together a retention plan and modify it as we have been doing in order to move forward basically amicably and bridge the gap between the call members and the full-time staff.
How will you manage the department budget, keeping in mind that all the competing needs and priorities for funding in the town?
I think we have to look into the future of what we need for capital expenses, vehicle, equipment, apparatus maintenance, personal protective gear, by putting a future budget plan together. We will make sure that the taxpayers of Grafton aren't hit all at once with one giant expense. Setting expiration dates for SCBA, for personal protective gear, to make sure that they are up to the standards of the NFPA. That's very important to make sure that we have them, every year with turnover. It is difficult, obviously, to expand the budget every single year, but again, the costs and expenses of maintenance and technology are something that we need to take into account.
Okay. As you may be aware, 70% of the fire departments in the United States being call or volunteer. Where do you see the future of Grafton's department?
I think, as I said before, it's very important that we retain for now all of the call force, and we recruit actively to get more call members. Those who live and work in town are very, very important to protect the residents and stakeholders of this town. That being said, I think the department could also benefit of some full-time members. That being included potentially the hiring of internal candidates who are qualified. But I believe that's a very future goal, and one that we have to move forward slowly with, taking into account that study from 2018 and the needs of the town, the department, and the board.
Please describe any grants, private, state, or federal, that you may have written in your current position. What was the outcome of those applications?
We applied for a simple AED, which is used for CPR, and we just recently acquired that grant, I want to say about a month ago. After a previous grant to that, but another one would be, we got a $15,800 grant for the use of thermal imaging cameras for our needs it's very important to use these cameras to see through the smoke in any sort of fire and to rescue any sort of victims. But that being said, National Fire Protection Association made standards this year, and our cameras are not up to those standards, so that was very important to require that. We had moved forward with another grant that was basically to acquire potential structural firefighting gear, but we ran into some issues about there was a member of the town who worked here who had retired, and the department did not transfer the information from that person who had retired into the FEMA system to move forward with that grant. So by the time we found out all the information on that, it was submitted slightly too late. That being said, we put a system into place using our fire program system that next year none of that will happen. We have found all the flaws and we have fixed them currently.
And last question here is, can you talk about the time when you adapted to a change and your fellow firefighters resisted changing from the old ways of doing things?
I would say something as simple as changing from 4-inch diameter hose to 5-inch diameter hose. There's a significant difference in the amount of water that you're able to hold within that hose. It's very important to us for firefighting operations. Basically, the town had moved forward, and I think there's something that firefighters always say is two things firefighters hate is change in the way things are, and it's very important to have that. That being said, it's resisted because it's heavier, it's more bulkier. You have to take everything off the truck. You have to change things around town, such as fire department connections. There's a lot of dynamics about it, and it can be costly as well, along with training on stuff like that. But it was an important change to push forward, and we're here now. We're going to work through changes. There will be a lot of changes, and I think the department as a whole is embracing a lot of the change.
Thank you, Captain. Before we move on, do you have any questions for us?
I do not believe I do. I just want to thank each and every one of you for your time and for having me in today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just, Peter, can we just mention that these questions were all put together from the board?
Got it.
So, Peter, we asked Peter to read them all, but they're from everybody on the board.
Understood.
So, just wanted to let you know that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Want to thank you for coming in, Captain. And again, I want to thank you for your service in your current position and the years of service that you have. I'm glad you moved to fire services. And I think that was your calling in the way you answered one of the questions. But thank you very much again for coming in tonight. And we will follow up when we conclude our interviews.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is now the time to do follow-up questions?
Did you have a follow-up question?
Just a couple.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I didn't hear anything from anyone. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. So on the question about leadership, you kind of made one brief statement that you'd lead by action, but I'm just wondering if you can. I see leadership as obviously the key trait for this. So can you just expound on that a little bit in terms of your leadership style, and if you have any examples? That
Absolutely.
would be useful, yeah.
So I think it's important to do little things that speak volumes, such as when you're at a fire, picking up the hose. Now that can't always be done by someone who's in charge. There are other things that need to be done, but there are things such as washing your own vehicle. When there's a crew and they're tasked to do all the mundane things, jumping in there and showing that you're actually choosing to use your skills in those actions, and showing that you can still do the job even though you've been appointed a different task and a different position, I think really motivates the members to see that you're still in it. Other things such as if you're going to one of the academy classes, inviting and motivating the other officers to join you, and using those skills, bringing them back, and having a training session so you can teach the rest of the department what they hadn't been able to attend. but what they might be interested in. Just things like that are very important for me to show motivation in the future. The rest of it would be, just SOPs and SOGs and jumping on committees like that, and forming them and revisiting them very often. Just, encouraging members basically to jump into whatever they feel suited for, and encouragement and motivation to me in this career are just something that are very, very important.
Got it. Thank you. That was really helpful. And just one follow-up question on the grant writing piece. You mentioned 3 different grants there: the CPR gear, thermal imaging, and the structure fire equipment. Were you involved in actually writing the grants for those, or
Yes.
you were? Okay.
All 3 of them I had written, actually.
Got it.
There was a department that came together to get different pieces for them. Some were much easier to write than others, but the biggest one that as I said, we missed out due to just a couple of abnormalities or problems with that. It was pieced together by department members who had answers for certain things.
Got it. Okay. That's all the questions I had.
One question.
Sure.
Captain, twice during your answering the questions, you talked about full-time members. Can you just tell us what scenario would have to take place to for you to propose to put on full-time members?
Sure. I think it's per the needs of the town. I think we got to look at call volume. We have to look at incident time from when the call goes out to the response. Those are very important, especially for both serving the protection of the community, but also for our ISO rating and so forth. There are things that we just have to look at in the future that have to deal with the potential of full-time members. I know that study put on, or suggested rather, the position I am currently in, as well as a training and safety officer. The needs of the community need to be first. If we are unable to respond, answer questions, go out into the public, perform safe activities for schools, these are all things that if the call members recruitment is not working as much, that we have to look towards full-time members to meet the needs of our community.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any follow-up questions?
I don't. Thank you.
All right, Captain, thank you very much.
Thank
That
you
was
all
it.
very much for your
Appreciate
time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Deputy Chief Matthew.
Are you ready?
Is the board ready?
Yes.
I didn't mean to overlook if you guys had questions.
No, that's okay. I didn't have.
No worries.
Just give me a big elbow next time, Matt.
I just wasn't sure.
Well, I'll elbow him and then he can elbow you.
It
There you
works.
go.
I kind of liked waiting till the end. It was nice.
Yeah.
Continued to flow, and then
That worked out.
That worked out.
Yeah.
All right, good evening.
How you doing?
Good, Deputy Chief Matthew. Welcome. Just want to kind of go over just what we're going to do tonight. We've got a list of questions that are from all of us, actually, and I'll be reading them, just so at one point a person will be reading them. We'll start off with just a brief introduction of yourself. Tell us who you are. We'll get into the questions, and then if any of the board members have any follow-up questions based on your responses, we'll go through that.
Okay.
All right. We'll give the floor to you.
All right. Eric Matthew, resident of Grafton. I've got 28 years in the fire service, 28 in Grafton, where I'm currently the deputy chief. And I have 22 years of full-time service in the town of Acton, where I'm currently a lieutenant. I have a wife and 4 kids that were raised here in town, and it's, I think that's about it. Yeah.
All right.
Excited for this opportunity.
Great, thank you. All right. So first question, why did you apply to become Grafton's first full-time fire chief?
to continue my service to the town. As I said, I've been a resident here since I was 13, and with my years on the department, I've come to enjoy serving the town and helping out my friends and neighbors. And I'd like to continue doing that, and also, furthering my career as well. And if I can do that at home, that's what I want to do.
Okay. What are the biggest challenges that you anticipate in the transition from your current rank to chief? And then based on what challenges that you list, can you tell us how you will overcome them?
One of the biggest challenges with the department now is recruitment and retention. And we've started a process already of growing our online presence and advertising, and we've been able to put on some new members already, and I'd like to continue that model in order to, for as long as, probably all the time, to keep that going, where we're always bringing new people aboard, and also getting members vested in the department, getting them involved is a big part of a transition. And if I can get them interested, involved, and members of the team, I know they'll give back to me in order to make the job better and an easier transition if they're on board.
Okay. How has your continued education prepared you for becoming fire chief? And the follow-up to that would be, what further education pursuits would you benefit from as a chief?
My education after high school has been the fire service. I've attended numerous academy classes and have built up my resume as far as taking officer classes and stuff, preparing me for being a line officer, and continued on moving up to chief officer classes and other things. At present, I've been enrolled in classes that I'm waiting for to hear from the academy for safety officer, fire officer 3, and I'm also hopeful to work towards my fire chief credentialing as well through the state.
Okay. Can you tell us something that challenged you as a leader? Did this change the way of did this change your way of thinking, and did it improve your leadership abilities?
One of the biggest challenges I had was I had I'll say a difficult subordinate, and we tried to handle everything at the lowest level we could, in-house, as we say, in the station, and take care of it. And the problem compounded, and I made the mistake of not bringing that problem up the chain higher soon enough. So when it did get to the top of the chain, the chief was like, "Why didn't you tell us about this before it got to this point?" So from that experience, I realized that I wouldn't want to be put in that situation myself if I was a chief. So I've learned from that using the chain of command, that as much as I preach it, is something that I had to do better myself. So that's one of those things that I would definitely say changed how I did things as far as leadership.
Okay. How do you view the role of the fire chief in Grafton, and what are the most important traits needed to be successful?
The role is going to be ever changing. It's a new role, having a full-time chief, and I think there's going to be a lot of changes that whoever the chief is, if it's myself, that will bring forth, and to try to grow and improve the department. Sorry, the second part of that.
Yeah, no problem. I'll read the question again. How do you view the role of the fire chief in Grafton, and what are the most important traits needed to be successful?
The most important traits are honesty and integrity, and also accountability. If I'm not honest with my people, I can't expect them to be honest with me, and same thing with integrity. And accountability is huge in the fire service as far as on scene and to each other. If I'm not accountable to them to know that they know that I have their back, again, I can't expect them to do that for me. So if I would expect them to hold me accountable just as much as I would them. With any issues that came up or whatever.
All right. Next question. What advice would you give yourself at the age of 15?
At the age of 15, study harder. My mother's probably laughing right now.
I think there's a lot of parents out there nodding their heads.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And now I'm thinking of my kids.
How would you describe your leadership style? How would you gain the trust of the department and maintain department morale?
My leadership style, I would like to say that I've learned over the years from, I've served under 6 different chiefs, numerous deputy chiefs, officers, and I've seen the whole gamut from screamers to what I call sheep. And I realize that you've got to be somewhere in between in order to keep the people following you. Because if you're screaming at everybody all the time, they stop listening because they don't want to hear it. And if you're letting things go all the time and not picking, holding the people accountable, then they'll also walk all over you. So I believe you have to be that person in the middle, and that's what I've been striving for. So as my guys have always said, if they see me mad or if I'm yelling at somebody, they know they really did something wrong, and it was probably a safety issue. But other than that, they know that I'm fairly even-keeled and able to handle the discipline or whatever with, I don't want to say ease, but with tact.
What is your vision for the Grafton Fire Department? What would you like to achieve 5 years from now? How would you lead the department to achieve those results?
I'd like to see 5 years from now the model that we've been working on, staying with the call department and growing the department, getting us back up to the numbers that we've had in the past. And again, the whole thing with recruitment and retention and keeping the people involved so that they stay and that they want to be here and that they build a good camaraderie within the whole department.
Okay. How will you manage the department budget, keeping in mind all the competing needs and priorities for funding in the town?
Well, I learned this year, doing the budget for the first time, that there's a lot of stuff going on. I always have maintained a constant involvement in watching, whether it be the select board meetings or finance committee meetings, and seeing what's going on in town. So I know that I'm not just looking at the fire department, it's the big picture. And working with the town administrator and yourselves to figure out exactly, hey, these are our, present our priorities and figure out what needs to be done, on an immediate basis, or what we can put off or work towards doing in a few years or that.
Okay. With 70% of the fire departments in the United States being call or volunteer, where do you see the future of Grafton's department?
The future, depending on how far out, eventually, again, I would like to keep the call force active, but with the growth of the town over the years, there's going to become a point where we're going to need full-time staff. And I think the way to do that is to bring it in slowly and keep an eye on what's going on, what's trending over the last few years, what are we looking for, what are the projections for the future, so that we can get ahead of that game if we need to.
Can you please describe any grants, private, state, or federal, that you have written in your current position? What was the outcome of these applications?
Grants, I haven't written any grants. We've worked on a few lately in Grafton that I've been involved in, and I've started networking with the other departments out there that have gotten grants, and to see how they were able to do that, what made it so that their grant got awarded as opposed to the ones that I heard had and stuff. So I'm developing an education in grants and hoping to continue, because who doesn't like free money?
Indeed.
Nothing's free.
Well, no, I know
all
that. I know
taxpayer
that. It still came out of our pockets, I understand.
That's right. All right, last question here. Can you talk about the time when you adapted to a change and your fellow firefighters resisted changing from the old ways of doing things?
In my department up in Acton, we transferred or transitioned from a basic EMT ambulance, which is EMTs on the truck, to paramedic service. And that transition was difficult because it brought something new. And as we all joke around in the firehouse, there's two things firefighters don't like: change and the way things are. So nobody's ever happy. And to try to get everybody to buy in is always tough. So I saw a division in the department when we started hiring paramedics, because the current EMTs were like, oh, these guys are coming in, now I can't get overtime in the ambulance and all this stuff. So it made for a difficult transition, and it's taken a few years to get everybody to buy in. And as an officer, that was my job, was to get the guys to buy in, the senior guys and stuff that were EMTs, to say, hey, the paramedics are here, so let's work with them and bring them in. And I can't speak for everybody, but I know on my group that we do a good job of including them in everything, and they're a member of the team just like anybody else. So we've kind of tried to meld it as best we could.
Great. All right, well, that concludes the questions. Again, these were input from all of the board members here tonight. And before, I guess we'll just change just a bit, just before you give any closing remarks or any questions to us, does any of the board members have any follow-up questions for Deputy Chief Matthew? Ray?
I have a follow-up. So, Deputy, you had mentioned at one point that you want to retain the call department, and in another question, you wanted to retain the call department, but eventually we'll need full-time staff. What scenario would have to take place for you to come to the town administrator or the board and recommend full-time staff?
A quick, large reduction of our call members. If there was numerous members that decided to retire or, got off for different reasons, if our staffing levels got low enough that I was concerned. Again, I live in town, so I want the fire truck to be able to show up at my house as well. When it gets to that point, that's when I would say, hey, we need to start thinking about this. And as the chief, I would like to have a plan in place for that when it does come that time, because I know it's been talked since I've been on for the last 28 years that, oh, we're going to go full-time someday. But it would be nice to have a plan to start getting that in play, but not until the point that we have to. Because like I said, from the study that we went through and all that, the call department's the way to go. And we've seen a huge change lately, and the core of the department, the members, they're sticking to it. So I want to support them as much as I can.
Is there any other follow-up questions for the deputy?
No.
Do you have any questions for us or a closing statement you want to give?
Just a closing statement. I want to thank all of you for having me out tonight, and this has been a learning and a good experience, and I thank you again for your time, especially after last night. You guys were up pretty late from what I saw.
I can't believe you watched the meeting.
They play it back the next day.
Oh, they do? I played it back all night.
Deputy Chief, I want to thank you for coming out tonight and wanting to be Grafton's next full-time fire chief and applying for this position. I know I speak on the behalf of all of us. Thank you for your years of service in the fire protection. We're very extremely lucky to have you and dedicated people like you working in our department. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Have Captain McDonald. Do you wanna-
I just have one question about
Yes.
procedure. So I think that candidates that you've already interviewed are hanging out.
Okay.
You are we gonna go? You're gonna deliberate after this, just so I can tell them what to expect. You'll go
Yes,
straight into
absolutely.
deliberation.
Mhm. Yep.
So we're clear with the candidates.
Are they coming in for deliberation?
They can if they want. It's an open meeting. I don't know about you, but I'm not telling anybody they can't attend a public meeting.
No, no.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Evening.
Ken.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good evening, Captain McDonald. Welcome, and thank you very much for coming out tonight. I'm going to read a list of questions that the board has prepared, so I'll be reading each one of the questions. And what we'll do is, before we get into questions, I'll have you give a brief intro about yourself.
Okay.
Once we answer the questions, some board might have some follow-up questions based on your responses that they'll take notes on and they'll ask you. And then we'll finish up with any closing remarks or questions that you may have for the board.
Okay, great.
All right?
Sounds good.
Great. Captain, you have the floor. If you want to give an intro.
Good evening again. My name is Kevin McDonald. I am a captain in the City of Hoyoke Fire Department, Western Mass. 20 years. This April, I just passed 20 years. Currently assigned to an engine company. I am a house captain there, which means I'm basically in charge of the fire station, fire apparatus, maintenance, ordering of supplies, tracking of supplies, budgeting of supplies in the station. I'm also in charge of 3 lieutenants and about 12 to 15 firefighters, depending on staffing for that time of the year. I have a bachelor's degree from Columbia Southern in fire administration, a graduate certificate from Columbia Southern as well in public administration, certified fire instructor 2, certified fire officer 3, both are national pro board certifications. I'm also a graduate of the Chief Fire Officer program for the Mass Fire Academy and UMass Business School, which is a 13-week program. It's the highest level chief officer training the Mass Fire Academy offers. 13-week program on the other side of basically the fire service, from the line firefighter to the chief officer. Dives into some human resources, some budgeting, some management styles, finances, things like that fire chiefs need to be made aware of, either when they're a new fire chief or aspiring to become a fire chief. I am an instructor at the Fire Academy, Mass Fire Academy. I primarily teach in the recruit program. I'm also involved in the fire officer training program and the fire instructor training program through the Mass Fire Academy. I come here today very interested in the chief position from the town of Grafton. I think it's a very interesting position, one that I'm very interested in hopefully being promoted to.
All right.
Married, 2 kids, daughter Riley, who's 15, will be 16 in July, I'm sorry. And son Pat, I know, she's watching right now too. My son Patrick, who is 12, he'll be 13 in June. My wife is in the crowd tonight. She was kind enough to come to the drive with me tonight. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right, thank you, Captain.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start into the questions. First one is, why did you apply to become Grafton's first full-time fire chief?
Well, I was notified of the position by a couple of colleagues of mine that I work with the Fire Academy with, that the position was coming open again. It's interesting to me, the town, doing some research through the Census Bureau, that your population has increased steadily over the last 10 years. And in my eyes, it's just going to keep increasing. As we all know, the pandemic is driving people out of the cities and into the suburbs, working from home more. People don't feel like they're tied down to living in the Boston and the Worcester. They can move out of the city and still work from home. It's a very interesting town. It's a nice town. My wife and I have visited a couple times now in the last 2 months. Took a look around the neighborhoods, took a look around the community itself, some of the restaurants. It's a very nice town. It's an interesting job. I understand it's a call department, but being a young firefighter still, I still have 12 years left in my career before retirement. So I think that I believe that I have the right amount of fire experience, the right amount of education, and the right amount of ambition to become the next fire chief here in this town.
Thank you. What are the biggest challenges you anticipate in the transition from your current rank to chief? And then based on those challenges, can you tell us how you would overcome those challenges?
Sure. First of all, I come from a full-time, no call, no volunteer department. We are all paid firefighters. There's about 120 of us in the department total, including officers, fire prevention, line firefighters, and so forth. I have very limited experience with call firefighting. The only experience I have is through the fire academy teaching call firefighters. So I think that's a challenge coming in from a full-time department, coming in from a different town. I realize I would be an outsider coming in. That may not sit well with some people, some members, some individuals in town it may not sit well with. I'm willing to take on that challenge. I believe that conversation, listening, and just being upfront and being forward and being present in public can overcome a lot of those barriers, those walls that might want to come up. Budgeting also, I have very minimal experience in budgeting. I do understand that, but my training and my education, I believe, shows that if I'm not comfortable with something, then I'm more than willing to go out and figure out a way to become proficient at that task. I do have colleagues across the state and across the country, really, who are chief officers who can guide me in the right direction and any questions that I may have in those areas that I'm not so strong in. With that being said, they're not going to show me how to do it. They'll guide me in the right direction so that I don't have to come back, keep bothering them year after year. I can kind of progress on my own after that.
All right, thank you. How has your continued education prepared you to becoming fire chief? And then what further educational pursuits would you benefit from as a chief?
So I was told very on in my career, 2002, when I went to recruit school in Stowe, the day you stop learning in the fire service is the day you should retire. I took that to heart. Much to the dismay of my wife and family, I am constantly going to trainings. It falls in my wife's shoulders a lot to take care of the family while I'm gone. But I believe that through my career and through every rank that I've gone through, I've tried to prepare myself for the next step. So when I was a firefighter, I did everything I could to prepare myself to become a lieutenant, which included fire officer 1, fire instructor 1, things that I thought that I may need to do on the fire ground. So some strategy and tactics courses for education. As I made lieutenant, I started preparing myself to become a captain. So that a little more experience, a little more responsibility at the fire ground. Went for fire officer 2, fire officer 3, went for instructor 2, went for some very minimal incident command classes at that point. When I was hired in 2002, I had no ambition of going past the rank of lieutenant. As I began to work in the city, I had some outstanding officers who mentored me and kind of challenged me to become better. I'm a proud second-generation firefighter. My father is a retired lieutenant in the city of Holyoke. And basically growing up and when I was first hired, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be my father. So I had no ambition of going past lieutenant. That quickly changed. And as I began to climb the ranks and began to go to more and more trainings and meeting other firefighters, other fire officers, I really kind of latched onto that education. So in anticipation of becoming a deputy chief in Holyoke prior to the process of the Grafton fire chief process, I began to take more advanced incident command classes. I began to go back to the National Fire Academy to take their command and control of incident operations courses, which includes the basic incident operations, the multiple alarm operations, and the target hazard operations. I am slated or targeted to go back in the fall to finish the last course in that series, which is natural and man-made disasters, which is a 2-week course that covers hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, things of that nature, on how to set up an EOC and how to guide yourself through that process of mitigating that hazard. In 2021, I was still not a college graduate. I attended North Adams State College in 1994 when I graduated high school. Had a little too much fun. So went into the military after I came out of college. I am an Army veteran, Operation Iraqi Freedom veteran. So in 2021, I decided to return to school and get my bachelor's degree from Columbia Southern. When I finished that program, I realized that I had some things that I was still not very proficient at on the administrative side, so I went back and got my graduate certificate in public administration. So that the education there, I've tried to stay a step ahead of the rank that I'm at. I believe that the courses that I've taken are in line with becoming a fire chief. And in the future, I totally believe in continuing ed and continuing training. My wife may not like to hear this, but I do anticipate going back and getting my master's degree at some point. So.
She's sitting right there.
I know.
Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. Can you tell me about something that challenged you as leader? And did this change your way of thinking? And did it improve your leadership abilities?
Absolutely. 2009, I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. I interviewed on a Wednesday night. On Tuesday night, I left my shift. At the time, we were working 10s and 14s, and I was the junior firefighter on a ladder company. So I took the lunch order on Tuesday afternoon for the 2 senior members. I interviewed Wednesday morning. Thursday night, I came back as a lieutenant on the same exact piece of apparatus, and I was just a junior man on with the same 2 firefighters. So I went from being the junior man to being the boss in about the span of 35 hours. As with anything else, some senior firefighters like to push the envelope and see what they can get away with. See how far they can push the rules and how far they can push you to see what they can get away with. So I had one individual who we kind of got a disagreement about uniform and uniform policy. He challenged me over the next few weeks, and I believe that at the time, I thought I was handling the situation appropriately, wanted to come down with the iron fist and go through the disciplinary process, and in hindsight, that was not the right way to go through it. So it did help mold me and help shape me as a leader and as a fire officer that there are other ways other than discipline to get your point across. And that's helped me since right up through my shift last night.
Thank you. How do you view the role of the fire chief in Grafton? And what are the most important traits needed to be successful?
So I believe the role of the fire chief is you have to be out in the public eye. You can't hide behind the big barn doors. You can't go in your office and close the door and hide from the public. You have to be out in the public. You are the department head. You are the figurehead for the department. You are the face of the department. I believe that you should be involved in the community. You should be out there in any community events that you can possibly be in. I'm sorry, what was the second half of that question?
Yeah, I'll read it back to you. How do you view the role of the fire chief in Grafton, and what are the most important traits needed to be successful?
Oh, okay. First of all, honesty. The public relies on you to be that head of the department. They rely on you to be the head of the fire department. So you have to be honest with them. You have to have good communication with your firefighters, your subordinates, your fire officers, your town administrator, your mayor, whatever the case may be, the town board, the select board. You have to have good communication with them. Transparency, honesty, and just you have to be out there in the public eye.
Okay. What advice would you give yourself at the age of 15?
Oh, so much. Yeah, I think just don't be in such a hurry to get somewhere, and don't think that what you think your plans are in the future are necessarily going to be what happens. You know, I think it's easy for someone to want something and want something right then and there, and then when it doesn't happen, they don't, you know, they get discouraged and stop pursuing that goal. I believe that you end up where you belong at the time that you're supposed to be there. So, 30 years later, I've kind of realized that. But at 15, I think that's a hard thing to understand.
Okay. How would you describe your leadership style? How would you gain the trust of the department and maintain department morale?
So I don't believe there's one leadership style that's appropriate. I believe your leadership style has to match the situation you're in. On the fire ground, in an emergency situation, it has to be that autocratic leadership style. It has to be the order given is the order followed. There's no time for debate. There is time for listening to people on the fire ground and hearing what's going on and taking all the information into account so you have a successful outcome. But it has to be that autocratic. There has to be one person in charge, and that one person in charge has to give orders so that you bring people home safe. I don't believe that's the appropriate leadership style in a non-emergency situation, though. I believe the democratic or the style where you can allow your leaders to lead without you looking over their shoulder. So I believe that, and I believe this now. When I assign a task to one of my lieutenants, I don't need to tell that lieutenant how I want the task done. I just want him to do the task. And quite honestly, I don't care how he does it, as long as he or she does it, the task at the end of the day. It's not my job to tell them how to do the task. It's really my job to, you know, to give them the task to do and then let them do their job. I don't believe in micromanagement. I believe in letting your leaders lead. I believe that fosters future leadership. I believe it makes a stronger department, makes a stronger firefighter, makes a stronger fire officer to let them do their job and not look over their shoulder constantly. I think one of the biggest things for morale is to show interest, to be involved, and to foster that mentorship with other firefighters, younger firefighters. You know, I do have a plan for the first 90 days. I don't know if you want me to go into that now or not, or if that's a future question, but it kind of breaks, it'll break me into the department coming in from the outside and some goals that I have. And I believe that through that 90-day process, it'll show that I am interested in being here. I do believe in the department, and I think that we can be successful together.
Great. What's your vision for the Grafton Fire Department? What would you like to achieve 5 years from now? And how will you lead the department to achieve those results?
So my vision for the department is to be a successful in the public eye department, a department that the town can be proud of, a department that is reliable, a department that will respond to you in a positive way. I do believe in some of the things in the study that was done for the town. I do realize it's 3 years old now. And I don't know how much of the study has been accomplished already and what has not been accomplished. I do believe in training, so I believe in the full-time training officer position that needs to be hired almost immediately. I think that will improve morale as well. And really, in the 5 years, if the town continues to add population, continues to grow, continues to have condominiums and housing projects put up, I do believe the need for some full-time firefighters on shift will be needed if that continues. If it levels off, you know, you do have a robust call department, and I believe that they can handle what's put in front of them. They've already proven they can do that now. But with the increase of population, I do believe that some full-time firefighters will be needed. That will also help us in providing a better service to the public At the end of the day, that should be our number one goal is that customer service.
How will you manage the department budget, keeping in mind all the competing needs and priorities for funding for the entire town?
Yeah, so fire service grants are huge, and there are a lot of grants out there for the fire service. Again, like I said, I have very minimal experience with budgeting, fire department budgets. It's not, I am willing to learn, I am willing to reach out, but I also just want to point out that in my experience, when somebody becomes the fire chief, quite often they don't have experience budgeting before they become the fire chief, unless they're already a fire chief somewhere else. Or that fire chief in their department has taken time to provide them with an insight into the budget. In my experience, in my discussions, that doesn't really happen that often. So, understandably, it may be a little scary for the town administration that somebody with limited budget experience will be taking over a budget of $1 million, about just over $1 million, I believe is what it is. I just saw it was just under $1 million is what I saw in here. But again, through that mentorship and through my mentors, I think I'd be able to be able to handle the budget, come in on time with the budget, and within the means of the department.
Okay. With 70% of the fire departments in the United States being call or volunteer, where do you see the future of the department?
So I know that you have about 50 call firefighters on the books, give or take. With that being said, if it's like many of the other call or volunteer fire departments that I'm aware of, you probably only get about 20 people coming back for the calls, and it's the same 20 people over and over again. And I don't know if that's the case in Grafton or not. That's just the trend. So I think that you need to increase that membership. You need to increase that activity in the membership, and whether that's through some type of financing or benefits, whether it's some kind of health insurance benefit added on, or it's some kind of tax break, or it's additional money, or whatever is going to drive your people to come back and respond back is kind of what you have to look into. Recruitment and retention is a big problem in the fire service now. It's a problem in the full-time fire service as well, not just the call and volunteer side. So I believe in getting to your people in town early, maybe in the high school level, some kind of junior firefighter program, some kind of co-op with your high school students. They can come into the fire station maybe once a month, once a week, whatever we decide to do, and just kind of show them the ropes as you go along the way. And if you get to them even younger than that, you open up your fire station to the Cub Scouts or the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or whatever civic groups you have in town, and give them that look into the fire station. The earlier the better. I think that you'll be able to increase your recruitment and retention through those means.
Okay. Can you please describe any grants, private, state, or federal, that you have written in your current position, and what was the outcome of those applications?
So I have not written a grant at all in my position. It's just not, unfortunately, it's not something that we do. There's one person in our department that is the grant writer, and those things are kind of held close to the vest, unfortunately. I have had this question before posed to me, and quite frankly, I was embarrassed when I was asked the question, and my answer having to say, I have no experience. So going back to the not knowing how to do something and trying to become trained on it, I went to the University of Houston grant writing program online in January. That was about a 12-week program, and it kind of walks you through the steps on how to write a grant successfully and what not to do in your grant writing so that it does not get denied. And I just recently finished that. I believe it was about a month ago.
Okay. Can you talk about a time when you adapted to change and your fellow firefighters resisted changing from the old ways of doing things?
Sure. So the hot topic now in our profession is transitional fire attack. It's kind of frowned upon from a lot of departments. That's basically when you fight the fire from the exterior first through a window, and then you move in and you kind of mop up the rest of the fire. And you know, our profession is a very machizoism, very bravado profession where you gotta go, people feel you have to go in the building automatically every single time. And that you get a lot of butting heads. And my department is no different. We have a lot of 30-year, 25-year firefighters who don't believe that you should spray water into the building from the outside and that you're going to push fire through the building and all the other things that we've heard. And they don't want to hear any other opinion but their own. So through training and through the fire academy, we have materials that we brought back to the fire station and kind of show them the science on how this may work. Now, again, the biggest thing is to get across to some people that it's one tactic that you can use. We're not saying we're going to use this every single time. So I think through training, through conversations, through videos and paperwork and magazine articles and things of that nature, and actually doing it, you may be able to change some people's minds.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's
you.
it, what we have for the questions, and I'm just gonna open up to the board if they have any follow-up questions to the responses.
I have two, Peter.
Right, go ahead.
In the question, what do you see in the future of the department? You know, with 70% of the people, the department's called volunteer across the United States. What scenario would you think would trigger you to put on full-time people?
I think the need for full-time people is there now, to be honest with you, sir. You have.
Don't call me sir.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No one else does.
Okay. Again, I'm not proficient on what exactly goes on in the town, obviously, but just driving through the town, you have some very serious target hazards in the town. You have some old factories, some old heavy timber mill buildings. You have some economic development projects that you were talking about coming into the town now. You have an enormous mill on the border of Millbury and Grafton. And if you have an emergency in one of these buildings, then we're fall behind the eight ball rather quickly if we don't have somebody on scene right away. I understand that, you know, to hire full-time people, it costs money. So that, you know, that's why I kind of would like to get into the role first and see how we are responding to these calls and how our training is and how our continuing education is and how we respond, how many people we get to respond to these calls.
Okay.
If we're doing it with the call firefighters that we have, then by all means, if there's no need to hire full-timers, then we don't need to hire full-timers. But if the need is there, then the need is there. And at the end of the day, again, serving the citizens is our number one goal, should be our number one goal. And if that requires having 2 full-time firefighters on duty, then that may be something that we have to do.
Okay. And just one more. Does Holyoke run EMS?
We semi-EMS,
you
so we don't run an
first
ambulance.
responder, or-
Yes, we are EMT basics in the city.
Yep.
We do respond to 9 major emergencies, categorize them. We do not run an ambulance, excuse me. We have a third party that responds to that and does a transport for us. But we do run EMS calls. About 70% of our calls are EMS calls.
So you're doing first responder?
We are doing first responder as EMT basics.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have to.
Anyone else have any follow-up questions? Colleen?
So you mentioned a couple times that you like to stay a step ahead, that, you know, you get into one position and you're constantly training for that next position. If you become chief, what's that next position that you're going to be training and focusing on and keeping on your toes with?
Well, the chief is the top of the scale.
Right.
I think that you need to, at that point, it would be, how can I become a better fire chief than what I am now? I don't view this job as a stepping stone. If I, you know, am lucky enough to be offered the position, my family and I are going to move here. We're going to be invested in the town. My son will graduate from one of the hopefully Grafton High School. My daughter as well. So we will be invested. This is not going to be a 3-year thing for me and then on to the next thing. This is, the next step would be hopefully retirement, if I'm lucky enough to get to that day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any further
I
questions?
just got one. So in the, which question was it? Yeah, so, along the lines of the questions, with, you know, what you'd like to achieve 5 years from now and whatnot, you know, you mentioned the 90-day plan. I just wanted to give you just a quick opportunity to give us a synopsis on what that 90-day plan would look like.
Sure. So, a three-tier plan. First 30 days, come in, just basically listen and observe, see what's going on in the department. I don't believe in coming in and making sweeping changes. I believe that's horrible for morale. I've been through it a few times myself now with our fire chiefs, and I just don't believe in that process. Meet with as many people as possible in the town, whether that's through some public events, hold a coffee event at one of the restaurants, however we can get through that. Begin the process of hiring the training officer and meet with all the department heads in the town. Just to get my face out there and let people know who I am. So that's the first 30 days. Meet with all the members of the fire department as well, and all the chief officers and line officers. The second 30 days, we'll review the training records that we have, review our rules and regulations, see if any need to be revised or if anything needs to be added. If that's the case, then form a committee for that. I believe that that's the best way to get everybody involved and improve morale, is to have everybody involved. To do that, have one person from each rank on the committee to rewrite the rules and regs or revise them. SOP and SOG review and revise as needed, as well as meeting with our surrounding community fire chiefs for automatic aid and mutual aid, and make sure that they know that we're available and that they're available to us if we should need them. The last 30 days, hire the training officer, get that individual started, review our target hazards in town to make sure we have a pre-fire plan for them, review our technology and what we're using, how we're writing reports, how we're keeping track of our runs and our emergency calls, and how we can improve our recruitment and retention programs. Also review our incident command structure and some officer training for our officers now, whatever they may need. Basically, hopefully overlap, and if anything falls through the cracks, just try to catch that before we get too far into the term.
That was very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any follow-up questions?
I don't. Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't think, do you have a closing statement you want to give us or any questions for us?
Not a statement. I just couple questions. The time frame for when you would like the person to start, and when you anticipate making those notifications for.
So I can tell you, we're gonna deliberate, today in open session. We'll come to a vote tonight on who we choose to, want to open, and then we enter into negotiations, with that individual. Pending successful negotiations, a start date would be probably negotiated, at that point.
Okay. I understand that I live pretty far away, so if the job is offered to me and I'd accept it, I would want to be here day one and staying here in day one. But do you have a residency requirement, a mileage requirement? I mean, I do anticipate living in town if it's offered to me, but we know how the housing market is now.
There's a
So.
bed in the town administrator's office.
What's that?
We have a bed in the town administrator's
I was
office.
gonna offer to stay in the library with you guys. If that's the old
Come on
library.
down. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we're working on it right now.
Excellent. If you got a room for me, I'm
We're building
in.
bunk beds this afternoon. It's gonna be great.
I think you're asking some very fair questions. I feel that, we could work that out, through the negotiation process. One of us will be appointed tonight to be the point person from the select board to enter into those negotiations. And upon, our discussion and notification, I will reach out and call that person tonight and let them know what the, final results are, of the meeting. So that way, whoever we decide and choose, they're gonna know tonight, and you're not gonna read about it in the paper or get an email tomorrow morning, that sort of thing.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that residency would be one of those points of negotiation.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Captain
you.
McDonald, thank you very much for coming in tonight, and applying, for Grafton's, chief position. we thank you for, again, your services in the fire protection service. More importantly, thank you for your services in our armed forces. Again, very honorable, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Whew, this is gonna
Just left you.
Yeah.
You do whatever you want.
You live in the municipal center now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go out and talk
Yeah.
to the candidates in the hall and give them some
absolutely.
clarity on the next steps.
Great,
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
So we want to take 5.
Why don't we take a few minutes to put our thoughts together,
That's
and then we'll
great,
reconvene
yes.
here in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a brief recess, and we will be back. Thank you. All right.
All right. Let's do
Good
it.
evening, everyone. Thank you. Welcome back. We're going to now go into the deliberation phase of our interview with the 3 candidates that come in. Suggestion on how to want to proceed, Ray? Did you have a?
Well, yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about one candidate everybody talk about one candidate at a time, or
That works for me. Do
how do you want to do that?
you want to go in alphabetical?
Yeah, we can just go the same way we did.
Okay.
Do that, yeah.
All right. So we're going to start off here with Captain Mclean's interview. Anyone would like to go first?
Well, I'll start off. We're talking Mike Colleen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, I think Mike is a great, and I actually want to start off by saying I think we had 3 great candidates,
Yes.
and I'm gonna compare it to, the last time we went through this. We have 3 great candidates, and this is not going to be an easy decision to make. Mike has been in the fire service for 12 years. Constant training, Mass Academy, SOP, SOG, recruitment, leading young. Difficult question. He had that difficult question of leading a young member out of an issue. Views that the fire chief should be a leader. Come together as one, respect, being truthful, motivation. Wanted to retain the call department for now, but full-time members are in the very near future, and that was actually spoken twice. He is experienced at grants. And when you talk about changing, and as one of the members, one of the people said, or the applicant said, changing the fire services is very difficult, because no one wants to change, because fires don't change, and some people can't understand why you don't put them out the exact same way you did 40 years ago. But things change. I think that Mike is a great candidate. I don't believe that he is ready to be a fire chief. I think he is, as a captain, he can advance more and work up to assistant chief, deputy chief. But I don't believe, in my opinion, that he is ready to be a fire chief. That's all I have, Peter.
All right. Anyone want to go next? Go ahead.
Yeah, sir. I don't have a ton of comments, so I'll be relatively brief. But I found his answers to be a little bit more brief than some of the other candidates. I liked that he did have extensive grant writing experience. That was a definite plus for him. A lot of the answers, as I heard them, seemed like they kind of came out of the MRI study. So I didn't hear the kind of creativity, I guess, and just personal experience. A lot of it seemed like it was just a direct reflection of what was in there, which is the direction that the fire department's headed in. but I didn't hear as much of like personal input into some of the answers that I would have liked necessarily. But I'll just kind of mirror a little bit what Ray said too. I think we've got three great candidates. And I felt like tonight these candidates are really appropriate for Grafton, more so than the last round of candidates that we had. So I'm really pleased that we have these options before us. That's all I have to say about that.
All right, thank you. Anyone else want to go next?
I'll go. So I'll just mirror everything. It's a hard decision, 3 great candidates. Some of the standout things Colleen mentioned was part of his leadership style would be through goals and benchmarking and lead through training. I agree having the grant writing experience is a major plus, but the nice part about that plus is if we don't select Colleen tonight, we don't lose that talent. That talent is still part of the Grafton Fire Department, and it's really great to have that.
Doreen, did you want?
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to. I'm agreeing with all of you, and won't repeat what everybody's saying. The only thing that differs a little bit from what Matt said is I actually made a couple notes that I liked that he kept referring to the MRI study and spent so much time really understanding the process that the town has gone through thus far and the direction that we see the department going. So, I kind of like that, and interviews can be nerve-wracking too. So,
Sure.
I think that pulling from that information was a positive from my perspective. I really liked that he said, "Never stop trying to be better." He sounds very motivating and definitely has some leadership skills. I like that he, in budget discussions, he talked about capital planning, long-term planning for the fire department. That was a plus for me that hasn't been brought up yet. He seemed really excited about the grant opportunities that have come to Grafton so far too, so I really like that. I will say, to Colleen's point too, I like the fact that if we don't choose him tonight, that he's a part of the department now as a captain, and a huge asset to the Grafton Fire Department, and that's huge. And I will say and agree at this point, out of the 3 candidates, I don't believe that he is the right choice for chief at this time, but again, that doesn't mean that may not be the case in the future, but that's where I stand right now.
I'm not going to repeat a lot of what everyone else says. I would agree with everybody too. One thing I will call out that I really did specifically like, and it's a little bit elaborating more on the budgeting question, was that he was really concerned about making sure that there was some planning in place so that way the town didn't get hit all at once with a lot of things.
I love
So
that.
I really thought that was a really good answer to, I think, to the $1 million question, right? Like, how much is it going to cost to maintain this and do this? And he's looking at it from a very strategic standpoint that he knows he's got other competing factors in the town and departments that are looking for all of the same dollars that we generate every year. I would agree. I mean, he's extremely talented. He's been with us for just about a year now. He has done wonders in his current role and continues to, do very, very well from what I understand. And, I have, heard months ago that, he's got a lot of the respect of the staff today. And that's something. That's someone coming in a command and earning that respect from the fellow department. I think it was really good to hear from just some of the firefighters. Again, I don't have that codified, but that was just in some brief conversations. But I would agree, I personally would not be ready to move forward with his candidacy for Grafton's first chief at this time. All right. With that, why don't we work on next with Deputy Matthew?
Eric, yep.
Let's go in the same order. That worked nice.
Yeah.
Okay. I like.
I was going to suggest going a different order, but
No.
Let's start with Ray.
so the deputy's got, 28 years in Grafton and 22 in Acton. He wanted to continue his service to the town. Recruitment and retention was a big item, and having vested firefighters. I'm sorry, I'm looking down through my notes here. I like the question, what advice would you give yourself at 15? And that was to study harder. He has been involved in HR issues and learned quite a bit in those HR issues. He wanted to keep the call department and staying with it through recruitment and retention, camaraderie. Budget wise, he was involved in the budget this year. Again, he wanted to retain the call department and the growth of the town. Eventually, we will need full-time staff. He has not written any grants, but he's networking with other departments on grant writing. The reasons that he gave for going to full-time people, it would be a large reduction of all existing members, staffing levels low, that needs a plan in place. But he felt that with the support of the current members, that he could resolve those problems and those issues and maintain the call department. I think he did a good job in the interview, and I think he is a very, very strong candidate.
Matt?
Yeah, so I agree that he has a lot to offer Grafton, and I think he's a very strong candidate. Some of his answers, I'll try not to repeat what Ray said. His answer about, the important traits needed to be successful really resonated with me. He brought up accountability, and I just felt this sense that he was all about establishing trust, and it just seemed like so much a part of who he was, and it was very, kind of candid off the cuff, but it just felt very, very real, I guess. So I really appreciated that sense of accountability and trust, and building that up within the department. I loved his, he mentioned in a couple of answers, his approach to how he would help the department manage the transition into more of a hybrid from the current call department that they're at, in the sense of really initially trying to grow the call force with retention and engagement and some camaraderie and that sense of trust and all that, but then as we do need to look at looking at the trends he mentioned, he anticipates that there would be kind of a slow ramp of additional full-time members, and I really liked that approach. He seemed to have a pretty good awareness of the whole town budget, and I thought he was really strong on that in the sense that he's watched some of the finance committee meetings and been involved and whatnot, and so I liked that he wasn't just thinking about the fire department. He really was thinking about the whole town budget. I really liked that, let's see. Yep, I liked his answer on leadership, which is to be somewhere between a screamer and sheep. Maybe not the most eloquent way to put it, but I totally understood what he was getting at, and I liked that answer. And on his last answer around changing from old way of doing things and whatnot, as a part of his explanation in going from basic EMT to full ambulance, I really liked that part of his focus was to integrate the paramedics. So these are kind of, outside, not really part of the department necessarily, and he really worked on that integration piece, which I think is going to be so important for Grafton's fire department as we transition to more full-time firefighters over the coming years. I thought he had a ton to offer, and I look forward to contrasting what he brings to the next candidate that we'll talk about. So, because I think they're both really strong.
Billy?
Yep. So, not to repeat too much of, everything they're saying, but, I had the same screamer to sheep. I really liked that answer, and to be somewhere in between. He mentioned recruitment and retention several times throughout his interview, but he still acknowledged the eventual need for full-time, which I think is important to acknowledge that is, something that could happen eventually. But like he said, he'd been on for, I think he said 28 years, and he's been hearing that for 28 years. So it could be another 28 years before that happens, or it could happen sooner. But the idea that you're at least acknowledging the need is important. I like that he's a lifelong learner. He's constantly taking classes, and I had accountability, honest integrity. I liked those were successful traits that a chief would need. But yeah, I think I'm with everybody that it's down to the final two candidates. For me, they're very strong candidates.
Doreen?
Yeah, bless you. Without repeating everybody else, I will say I really liked him a lot, and I think he's a very, very strong candidate. A couple of things that really hit me was how he said he wants to be of service to the town, and he wants to further his career at home, and that hits home for me, being a lifelong resident of Grafton, and just there's something about knowing every street, every corner of the town and stuff that's kind of nice too. So just to sort of like differentiate candidates here, that's something that I like. He put a lot of emphasis on recruitment and retention. I know this has been brought up, but it is a priority for where the department is now at this time, and it's extremely important, and the fire department has been diligently working on that lately. And so just acknowledging that and being important, and then saying that the role is ever changing too, that obviously our town has changed. We're hiring our first full-time chief, and just acknowledging that this position is also going to be ever changing depending on the buildings that go up in town, whether it turns into a full-time department. The responsibilities of this role are going to continue to change, and I think he did a really good job expressing that, and I appreciated it very much. So I think he's he may be my first choice, but it's a hard decision. So I'm looking forward to talking about the third candidate.
I would agree with everything that all of your observations are spot on with mine. The one thing I will add that was that he was involved with the grants, but he wasn't really fully responsible for writing them. I think that's an important characteristic I want to point out to everybody. I would agree, he understood that the role of chief is always evolving, in that changes are inevitable, and you have to be willing to accept those changes in order to maintain an effective department. I would comment that, he really came out with something that personally challenged him that I thought was really good. And a lot of people can't do that. And I want to say I think that's part of an accountability and integrity and honesty trait that I want to say really kind of stuck out with me and resonated. And the fact that he provided with us like an analytical approach to looking at, what would be one reason to move from a call to a full-time. And I thought that was pretty good. And I would agree. He's a very strong candidate, and I'm looking forward to reviewing Captain Donald here in a few minutes. But I would agree with everyone else's statements. Anything else? All right, why don't we move on with Captain McDonald? Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. Captain McDonald. I have more notes on this page than I had on two of the others altogether. I think that Captain McDonald is a hell of a firefighter. I think he has all the leadership qualities that you need to be a chief, a deputy chief, a battalion chief. I think that his training and is exemplary, really. It's amazing that what he does. And then he didn't even tell his wife that he was going to go to Houston. He can deal with that on the way home, but there was one thing that I wasn't that crazy about. And that was the fact that we need full-time people now. In my opinion, Captain McDonald can go anywhere and be a damn good fire chief. But also, in my opinion, is that we don't need full-time people now. That it will be the downfall of the call department. And I really, I'm not sure what the captain based that on. But I wrote down here that we have big target hazards. And I also wrote down that he didn't do his due diligence in the town. That's my opinion, and but other than that, exemplary firefighter.
Matt?
Yep. Yeah, I thought Captain McDonald was the most articulate of the three candidates. I really felt that he had a very thoughtful answer to just about every single answer, and I really appreciated that. Some things that stood out, maybe, I guess, I'll just go in random order, I guess. I have a little bit of a concern that he comes from a full-time, fairly large fire department currently, and has a little bit less familiarity with, has little familiarity with call fire departments, so that's a bit of a red flag. And we have some budget and grant writing gaps as well. I'm not as concerned about those as I am experienced with a call department or a hybrid department. So, but there was some really kick-ass answers to some of these things that, I thought he was super candid when talking about the biggest challenges. He just owned right up to it. Said, "Look, I've got some budget gaps. I'm an outsider." And his coming from that. So I just like that he kind of owned up to it and was just very, very forthcoming with his answer on that. I liked his answer to the what advice would you give yourself at 15? Just the kind of slow down a little bit and accept that things are going to continue to change, and don't worry so much about it. You'll worry. You'll end up where you belong. I really liked that answer. I thought he had by far the strongest answer in terms of leadership style. That one really stood out to me, and it was something that I was kind of hyper focused on tonight because I just think it's such an important element of a fire chief. So I liked that he's got a very adaptable leadership style. He was really articulate and clearly had thought about leading and leadership styles, and I really liked his allow our leaders to lead, and don't micromanage. Like that whole thread that he articulated, I thought was really, really strong in terms of leadership. So, and then I guess the other thing that stood out to me a little bit was just in his discussion about helping some of his older department members transition to more modern structure fire techniques, I thought, that combined with leadership and kind of his focus on and real world experience with helping to transition individual fire department members and the leadership team to different techniques to kind of keep up with modern firefighting and fire department capabilities, I thought was just a really strong, narrative for me that I really resonated with. It's really difficult because I think we've got two options, which are both really good ones. We've got kind of the hometown boy, who's super familiar with Grafton, obviously, commands a lot of respect within the department and whatnot, and is much more familiar with the way Grafton does things. We've also got another candidate that I think represents something different. I'm having a really difficult time thinking about what the right thing for Grafton is. I think I've articulated my concerns around, budget, the grant writing, and experience with call. Probably my biggest concern about Captain McDonald was around the transition to more full-time firefighters, and that the speed and the pace of that, and the budget impact on Grafton, and also just the operational transition of that. So I'll let other people talk because I've been talking for a while.
It's okay. Colleen?
So I agree. I found McDonald to be an extremely strong candidate. He acknowledged that being an outsider would be one of the most challenging things he would face. But he said a lot of things that really resonated with me, that customer service is the number one goal. He needs to be in public. And that was one of our select board goals, is talking about customer service. And he said that a couple times. I liked his leadership style answer. It's not one size fits all. It's to fit the situation. And what I heard about the need for full-time was a little bit different than what you guys are hearing. He sees that there is a potential need now, but it didn't get mentioned in his 90-day plan beyond, a full-time training officer. He also acknowledged that while he sees a need, he's not coming in to do sweeping changes. He's going to come in, see how it's going, and if it's going well, he's not going to implement full-time fire. That's what I was hearing. And so it didn't stand out to me as a red flag at all. It sounded very reasonable and a tempered approach to how you should be looking at all of this. I liked that he teaches recruitment at a fire academy, which is a big thing that is part of Grafton is retention and recruitment. And the guy literally teaches how to do that, which I find to be a very strong feature. And his approach to try to get them early, get young volunteers, and gave some really great examples of how he would lead, not just, in retention and recruitment, but just a lot of different examples when he went over his 90-day plan. And, I just think it's a difficult position to be in, but it's a great position because, we get to keep two of these people and potentially add a third and make a really strong team.
That's a good way to look at it.
Doreen?
Yeah, by the time it gets to me, I have
How do you
little
think
to
I
say.
feel?
You guys are all
How do you think I feel?
killing it.
You didn't have to go last. You could have gone next.
You said keep the same.
Yeah, so I'm going to repeat a couple things just because I think it's important to reflect on. So, very well qualified, I would say. Arguably the most qualified candidate, except for things that were brought up that I have slight concern on. So I really liked, in particular, being successful in the public eye, involved in the community, like you said. I also really liked that he was honest about the budget and grants. And it's an important part of the position, but based on the interview and the way he answered the questions. I don't have a big concern about that. I do think that, you know, he's talked about reaching out to colleagues, and that's what we do, right? That's what we do to learn, mutual aid, whatever it is. And I have less concern about that. My biggest concern would be the limited experience with on-call firefighters. And really that's it. That's the issue for me, because as we transition this department, we have an on-call department, and it's very important to me that we choose a leader that can work with the department that we have. So, and I'm not saying that he can't. And it's like we're in this position, as Matt has said, where we have someone that the department gets along with, who's, I think, very qualified for the position, knows Grafton really well. But then we have someone else who could be coming in, a fresh start for the department. And there's definitely some bonuses to that as well. So I'm having a hard time making a decision, but my one hang up is, and I appreciate the honesty, is we have an on-call fire department. And I really would like to see someone with experience who has worked with an on-call department. So, but to Colleen's point, he does training. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of like, yeah. So, anyway, I'm struggling with that a little bit.
Can I get
You're answering something?
to Doreen's point?
Oh, okay.
I hear what you're saying,
Mhm.
but just to add on to that a little bit, another takeaway I got from this candidate was that when he was first asked about not having grant writing experience, he immediately got grant writing experience.
For sure.
And I see that throughout his interview, that when he found a shortcoming, he fixed it. And I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, I think it's, and that's why that answer made me not concerned
Yeah.
about budget or, you know, onboarding full-time people, any of that. But the reality is we have an on-call department right now, and I am also sensitive to the fantastic fire department we have. And the decision we make tonight is obviously going to affect them the most.
Yep.
So this has to be mentioned.
So my comments are in alignment with the majority of what was said tonight. I feel that, you know, my personal belief is, you know, looking at a candidate that can move our department forward, modernize, but also be in the, you know, we also have to consider what is the least disruptive way to do that. Not to say that I'm not, I don't have the courage to look at change, but any candidate that we pick tonight is going to implement their vision of their change for this department going forward.
Very true.
And one of the characteristics that I want to say about, you know, Captain McDonald tonight was that, you know, when he saw a deficiency in his own personal professional career, he went out and filled that gap, to your point. And that's admirable. I will say that, you know, having just a full-time firefighter experience and then coming into Grafton, I'm really weighing between two candidates now about, like, you know, what would be the least disruptive. I would like to hear a little bit more on this board's view on that. I know this is my own personal, one of the key characteristics where I'm looking at, you know, who I would want to support and choose for the next chief. So not to repeat what all of you said, everything that you all said, I completely agree with. Excellent firefighter, excellent command, has demonstrated in the city of Holyoke for 20 years, second generation firefighter, and just knowing that, you know, he works with the fire academy, he's an excellent trainer, does, you know, also means that he'll continue to be an excellent trainer. You know, I don't think, you know, him coming on board as a chief is going to change that, right? So, you know, I look at the pluses and minuses of what this position is, and when you become the chief in Grafton, that's going to be the first and foremost responsibility in my book. Anything second to that, I would be it would be discouraging, and I would say that about any chief that we would choose tonight. I agree. I'm not concerned about the budgeting component of it. I think those are administrative skills that can be taught. There are plenty of people in our town government here who have done budgets, who can assist in that capacity. Even our own department has been, hand-holding and being responsible this year for its budget. Yeah, I mean, we have 3 great interviews tonight. 2 of these people are very strong candidates, in my opinion. I'm more interested, personally, in making sure that we have one shot to get this right. All right, and I believe that the decision that we make tonight ought to be, we should be considering everyone's concerns about how we feel that this department is going to transition to its first full-time fire chief. Thank you.
Can I add one more thing, Peter?
Sure.
I just want to remind the board too that we're choosing a strong chief. And I think that's important to remember and talk about as well, that this individual is going to report into the board. They're going to have autonomy in their own department, in terms of hiring and budget. And so it's, we should keep that in mind as well.
I would say that out of all the candidates, they all said that working collaboratively together. I think that was a theme I saw with the responses that I heard tonight. But I would agree, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
I think just based on that is and Doreen, we know it's gonna be a strong chief. I totally forgot about that. I believe we need to maintain the call department for as long as we can. That in the last 4 months, they've shown us what they've done. And it's been amazing, as I have said before. And I think we should continue it.
Okay. Any other thoughts from anybody else?
Sure. I'm going to encourage the board to take a bit of a leap of faith. That we should consider somebody from outside, because there would be some disruption, probably a little bit more than if we had chosen somebody who's currently working with the department kind of day to day. But disruption isn't always necessarily bad. Right, so there's good disruption out there, in the sense that you bring somebody who's got a different perspective, who's got a they've got a tougher job, arguably, to develop that sense of trust and accountability with fellow members and whatnot. But I just thought, Captain McDonald had a more strategic vision for Grafton. He was. I thought he was a little bit more articulate with how he would approach things. He clearly has a lot of experience with a larger department that is, has a lot of the elements that Grafton wants to evolve into and whatnot. So he kind of has that experience already, and I really felt that he was very personable, and I think he's not somebody that I have concerns about fitting culturally within Grafton. I really thought that he had the personality to fit in pretty well. Although I do have some reservations about his lack of experience with the call department, I trust in his answer that he wants to move here and make this his career for the next 12 years. This feels like to me, feels like the future of Grafton. And it is a bit of a leap of faith, but I don't know. His interview, for me at least, was a little bit head and shoulders above the others in terms of his leadership capabilities, his vision, and his ability to, he's already managing a whole station, with lots of call firefighters. He's got lieutenants and, other fire department members kind of in the chain of command underneath him and all that. I just think he's got everything that we need, and I'm willing to kind of take that leap of faith and put that one reservation aside, and trust that he's gonna, essentially when he becomes part of the department, he's gonna have that sense of how Grafton does things, because our membership will make sure that he knows how we do things in Grafton, and he's the chief, and he's going to have a vision, and he's going to approach things in a certain way. But all of the answers that I heard in terms of how he would manage things, his leadership qualities, and it all kind of added up to me to be very, kind of what we need, a positive disruption for Grafton to move things forward in a good way, in a deliberate and professional way. So that I guess that's my pitch for.
Anybody else? Colleen?
Yeah, I agree with the way Matt is viewing this, and I heard a couple times tonight that firefighters hate two things. They hate the way it is, and they hate change. So whether we keep it the way it is with a status quo candidate or a change candidate, sounds like they're gonna hate it. So I got that going for us. But I agree with the way Matt was viewing it, and I like the idea. I truly like the idea that all three candidates are so strong. That's the best way to get all three, right? Is to take that leap of faith and bring in an outsider.
Anybody else?
You know,
Yeah, right.
Matt, great points. But we made a change, and that change happened January 1st. And a lot of people stepped up to the plate, and they did a great job. And I don't want to, I know Captain McDonald's sitting here, he's sitting here. But, and I don't want this to sound bad, but he has never served as a call firefighter. The company that he runs, he's a house captain in a station that has 15 members. He doesn't have 50. He doesn't have 55. He's got 15. And it's a union department. There is a big, big difference in management style between union departments, full-time, and call departments. And I don't want to throw away, and I'm so, that sounds really bad. I'm sorry. I shouldn't even have said that. Strike that, will you, Bill? We're not in court, are we? No, okay. I don't want to pass aside all of the good work that's been done in the last 4 months. And I think they have done a hell of a job.
I don't think that would happen.
And I'm not saying that can't be continued, but I think we have a damn good team right now, and I want to continue it.
I want to point out something too, and you brought up a point about Captain McDonald's experience, and you talk about bringing in that positive change, and one of the main 2 or 3. One thing that's unique about one of the candidates, the top 2 candidates that we're talking about tonight, is one of them has worked in a full-time department in leadership, and has also worked in the capacity of a call department as a line firefighter and in leadership. And if you're looking for that leap of faith, and if you're looking for some additional characteristics that really the interview process doesn't pull out, but if you really want to point out like why I feel Deputy Chief Matthew I feel is a better fit for Grafton, is because he has done both of those roles. So if you ask me, and his evaluation when we put him on the spot, like how would you evaluate whether to bring full timers in? He talked about, it's like, it would have to get to the point where I couldn't deliver a service to Grafton and we can be safe. I thought that was a pretty good answer. But he's also looking at this as, I run a full-time department, and I'm also someone who has been in an all-call department for 20 plus years. I think Deputy Chief Matthew brings both of those experiences. And I think that's important. I think, Grafton, this is why I say we have really, one chance to get it right. And I think, you brought up some good points, Ray, and I'm weighing over more on Deputy Chief Matthew at this point because of that. Because I do think that experience is what Grafton needs for it to go from where it was, from the inception of the department being all call, to having some full-time staff, to, eventually sometime when someone it's in their blood and in their DNA as a call firefighter at some point might have to evaluate and say, Grafton, we're at the point now where we can't guarantee that we can get enough people in trucks and safe. We need to consider this, and here's why. I thought that was a great answer to the question, and I feel that he's got those characteristics to make that big determination. I get the leadership style of Captain McDonald's. It was fantastic. I mean, some of the examples that he gave were numerous, were very good, and I feel that a full-time department warrants a different type of leadership than a call department.
Absolutely.
But having someone who's done both, I think right there puts them on the top for me. Anyone else have anything they want to add?
I'll add to that. I agree with Ray and I agree with Peter as Deputy Matthew being my first choice. And for all those reasons that you said, when we think about, there's two things going through my head. And Matt, I really appreciate, you saying like taking a leap of faith. And I think that Grafton has done an outstanding job the past few years. We have turned over a lot in town government in the past few years, including this guy sitting right here. And
See how well that worked
and
out?
it's worked out fantastic.
He was from somewhere.
I don't even know.
I don't either. Never did.
But it's worked out, right? And so if I think of that, I'm like, yeah, let's just keep making those decisions. But I've also, I've grown up with public safety and law enforcement and everything my whole life too, and I don't believe taking a leap of faith in this, in a fire department or a police department is necessarily the place to do it. And Peter just said, well, we only have one time to make this right. Well, actually, this is the second time. So we have
Third time's a charm.
yeah, no. And when I think about once this is all over and the dust settles and, like to your point, Colleen, no one's going to change no matter who we choose tonight. The recruitment and the retention of our on-call fire department is extremely important for our budget, for the future of the department, but most importantly, the people who are serving our town right now. And so I don't want people to leave because of the choice we made or not be recruited in because of the choice we made. And that leans me toward keeping someone who is already part of the department that people respect, that understands the three stations and wanting to bring the department together as one, all the personalities involved. And I think it'll be a smoother transition. He even mentioned he knows what we do. He knew our meeting last night. He's got a relationship with Evan. All those things to me are a conservative way to continue growing this department in the right direction because they're doing a fantastic job and I want that to continue.
Colleen?
So I agree with what you're saying, but I do have a question for you.
Sure
If
thing.
retention and recruitment are the number one priority for you, why wouldn't a person who teaches recruitment be the top candidate for you?
So it's not necessarily about the skill set of recruitment and retention. It's the current department that we have right now and their I guess retaining what we have, I guess is even more important to me. But also we've already started down the road of recruiting on call. And so for me, the importance of working with an on-call department, to Ray's point, is a key part of the job.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I guess
Hey, I can be convinced otherwise if you guys want to keep
Doesn't
this
sound like
conversation
it, though.
going.
It
No,
does not
I,
sound like.
Well,
no, I absolutely can.
I guess that's kind of where
let's keep talking.
I'm at.
Yeah, it sounds like.
I want to be really clear.
Yeah, this is the most important thing I think I've
Deputy
done on
Chief
this
Matthew,
board.
I would feel very comfortable with
100%.
him as our chief. So, if you guys are in a position which I think we've sort of sussed out where we are in terms of, candidates 1 and 2. If you guys are fixed on that and we've had our
I'm
discussion, then that's
Not fixed. Change my mind.
okay.
Yeah.
I
Let's
just,
keep going.
I think that, that as far as the recruitment and the retention, all the candidates focused in on that. And I think, Captain McDonald he's a very personable guy. I think
Yeah.
my sense of it is that the fire department would very quickly coalesce around his leadership, and we'd be adding somebody into the department in addition to what we have already, which, Ray, I agree 100%. I really have enjoyed watching everybody step up and have them all come together. I think that we could then put a leader on top of that, which would take what's happening and just continue it with, a highly professional kind of sensibility to the whole thing. Having kind of gone through some of that transition already, and like, I know what you're saying, Ray, about the sort of the requirements and the management style, I guess, of working with kind of represented labor and full-time. It's very different than call, but all of the characteristics that I heard and the adaptability of the management style and everything, I just am confident that Captain McDonald's going to be able to come in and learn the style of Grafton and appreciate what a call department is all about, and appreciate what Grafton's clear priority is, which is retaining that call department as long as possible. The guy came in for an interview and he doesn't really know all the kind of our backstory and
Fair enough.
all
Yeah.
the subtext and all of that. So we've articulated it now, but he's very clearly I think the most qualified here. He's got the personality, he's got the vision and the leadership skills. And I just have a level of trust that I think he'll learn what Grafton's priorities are and be able to make that adaptation to his leadership style and the way that he approaches things. And it's not all the candidates have things that they need to learn and upskill on, and I don't think that his is the hardest necessarily.
I also just want to acknowledge what Colleen said, that we would have the other 2 candidates still in the department. So that's a really good point.
Get the strongest by having all 3.
I don't think we're sort of throwing anything away if we hire an outside candidate. I really don't. I think that progress continues. I think the department's come together since January. You said it pretty clearly. The change has been made. We've got new leadership. They're together now. They're all yanking on the same end of the chain, and they're making really good progress. I think we have an opportunity to bring in some really strong leadership that I think is important.
Peter?
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
I think, Matt, I agree with you. I mean, Captain Donald is an excellent candidate. He would be an excellent candidate for a full-time department, as a deputy or battalion or a chief. He really would. He'd be absolutely fantastic. But what we have is and we're in kind of a situation, is that we gave a group of people on the fire department 4 months to turn things around, and they're still doing it, and they've done a hell of a job. I don't want a change in management to Captain McDonald's level of management to upset that apple cart. And if you think it's not going to, It will. It will upset that apple cart tremendously, because there are people on the other side of that TV right there that are watching this. And they're going, all this work we've done in 4 months, and not that we're gonna give it, we're not gonna give it to Eric, or we're not gonna give it to Mike, but we're gonna give it to someone who is totally outside the department, when the work and the progress of the work, it's not gonna be fixed in a year or 2 years or anything like that. It's gonna take a while to fix this. And I really believe that the 4 months has shown what this department can do on its own. With a leader that we have in place, Paul, and the officers who have done an unbelievable job. And I think we need to just move and keep that thing flowing, and not all of a sudden throw a fence up in front of it. And then everybody gets all verklempt, and they get all, verklempt. Yeah,
Ray,
and, so,
I want to add to that too. Over the past 4 or 5 months now, I've really liked seeing the reports. I've seen, you're right, they've demonstrated. And if I didn't like something going on, and if I felt like, this is really not going in the direction that I envisioned it going, I could definitely see bringing someone completely from the outside and going on that leap of faith that you're talking about, that has all the characteristics that you're leading to. Yeah, I would agree. Yes, people don't like it the way it is, but they also don't like the change. But right now, it seems to me like everyone is liking those changes that are occurring. I haven't really heard of morale problems at the department level. And you brought up a good point, because right now, we're seeing something that's being demonstrated right now. And not one of us has really been critical of that. If more the other way around, we've been extremely pleased with that. That would be just another emphasis of, where I feel, Captain McDonald would be fantastic in almost any other department, especially with full-time, dealing with unions, just dealing with the bureaucracy of a city department. All right? That's much different than Grafton's town department. I feel that bringing him in and looking at all the work is you would be pulling, and everyone's kind of pulling the chain in the same direction, but you'd be adding a variable that would add a vector to that change that could break it. And I'm not willing to take that risk tonight, personally.
So, if I may.
Yeah.
I would like to add to a couple of things Ray said, where how the department has done an incredible job stepping up, and we have seen a lot of leadership come. And I wrote down one of the things McDonald said, which was he believes in his leadership style, and he wants to let leaders lead. And I think what we've seen over the last few months, it would continue under his leadership. I don't think it would it would diminish it. I think it would help it grow. And to say he would be fantastic in a full-time department, but just not here, the future of Grafton is eventually going to be full-time. We saw that throughout all of the interviews. It's not going to be next year, but to not acknowledge that full-time and try to prevent it, that's us as a board not looking to the future and not being cognizant of the needs. We have tremendous amount of growth coming up, and one of the answers was an increase in call volume could need full-time leadership, and that's just, I think we've hit a stalemate. I think we do know where the votes are going. I'm not really interested in sitting here and just trying to convince people otherwise when we've clearly made up our minds, so I don't know.
I'm with it. I've kind of made my pitch, and I think unless anybody's wants more discussion, we're just where we are.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, is there a consensus from the board?
consensus?
There is.
Yeah,
There-
all right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we appoint Deputy Chief Eric Matthew, Fire Chief of Grafton.
I second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
I just want to say, I'm super confident, in this, and I'm, really excited, for this transition.
Uh,
Go ahead.
I just wanna comment on the motion.
Oh, go for it.
Are you appointing Eric Matthews, or are you voting to enter into negotiations?
Well, voting to enter into negotiations. I'm sorry, I got a little,
You did.
you know, I went
Wanted to
off a
make
little
sure
bit.
we're clear on that step.
All right, then I will second the amended motion.
Okay. Pending successful negotiations. Okay.
Yep.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just, because I know there's gonna be some pissed off firefighters out there potentially, because, you know, there was a lot of discussion about an outside candidate. I just wanna, again, articulate my very strong support, for the lieutenant chief and our moving forward with him. I think he's gonna be a great fire chief.
No, I agree with that. I do think that there will be, but that's part of the job. You know, we really needed to give everybody a fair shake, and without having these conversations, we wouldn't be doing our jobs. And it's a tough job sitting up here to do all that.
Absolutely. I didn't
Yeah.
want there to be any notion of non-support for this, for this candidate. So
Yep.
I have the utmost faith that this is a good decision.
Okay, good. No, thanks for saying that too, because I think it was important that we talked through all this, and I see everybody's point on the board, and, you know, you have to step away and think, like, we're the decision makers, right? And
Yep.
this person's gonna be reporting into the board, like I said, as a strong chief, so, I also want to acknowledge that not all of my decisions are based on just what the fire department wants. Like, you know, I did my capstone on this 10 years ago. I've been following the Grafton Fire Department for a long time, and I want to get it right. And it's been really hard because we had really good candidates tonight.
Yep.
So,
Before we take a vote, I just want to make a comment to, my support of the fire department and all the candidates that came out here tonight. This is, doing a public interview is one of the most humbling things that anybody could go through. And it's not always easy, and there's always going to be one person who's going to walk away pleased, and there's going to be others that are going to walk away, shucks, well, next time. I do want to mention that I appreciate all of the candidates that came out here tonight and gave their time, and I want to wish them all the very best. If there's anything that need more clarification on later on, I guess feel free to reach out to the town administrator. No, you don't want to.
not you.
Because that happened last time. That happened last time, and I had them reach out, but I just wanted them to know. Again, I wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and I want to thank this board too for going through this process. I know this is the second time around, and more importantly, the fire chief search committee. The amount of hours and the time frame in which they were able to turn around. I mean, this is. I said to Mark Haddad earlier, I said, thanks for making this really, really difficult. And he kind of chuckled and he said, that's what I wanted. So you got your wish. But I do want to thank that board and their leadership and the amount of hours that they put in behind this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, declare the motion carried unanimous. Thank you. At this point in time, we have concluded the formal interview process. I was going to ask the chair, as the chair asked the board, if we could please convene an executive session. I'll ask the board now consider entering an executive session in accordance with Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A, pursuant to Purpose 2, to conduct strategy sessions and preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel. Eric Matthew. At this time, do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second,
Motion made and seconded. This will be a roll call vote, please. Start with Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead,
Mead eye.
Mr. Opton,
Both and I.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Carlson, aye. We are now in executive session. We'll be only reconvening for the purposes of adjournment. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great night.